We've got to really buckle down, get a clear vision of who we are and why we exist, and teach that and live that out with our team every day so that our clients understand it. And 2020 was a real catalyst to just force those changes on us because we knew if we didn't, we were going to be obsolete and not survive it.
When Fancher said that, I knew our listeners needed to hear the rest of the story because every CEO eventually hits that moment. The moment where clarity is not optional, where the way that you've always done things isn't going to carry you into the future. Welcome to the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast, where we help CEOs and marketing leaders simplify marketing, lead with confidence, and grow with purpose. And today's conversation with Fancher Sargent, the managing shareholder at CRS CPAs in Jackson, Tennessee, is full of lessons every leader can use.
What I love about Fancher's journey is that it didn't start with a big polished vision. It started with an internship. What a great story. He walked into a small firm as employee number 5 and then eventually helped lead a multi-office 50-person practice through mergers, specialization, culture shifts, and some tough identity-defining moments.
Yeah. And what ultimately unlocked their growth wasn't a new service line or a fancy strategy. It was clarity. They did the deep work of defining their mission, their vision, their values. They shifted away from being generalists. They let go of limiting beliefs like clients expect me to do everything. And they embraced the idea that saying no is sometimes the most strategic move that you can make.
If you are leading through change, feeling stuck, or trying to get your team aligned around what matters most, this episode is going to give you a lot to think about.
Let's jump into the conversation with Fancher. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast. And I'm really looking forward to today's episode. Today, I have joining me as my guest, Fancher Sargent, who is with CRS. It's a CPA firm based out of Jackson, Tennessee. And Fancher is the managing shareholder. And Fancher, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, Fancher, you and I have known each other going back to the mid 90s, back when we were both at Union University, and some great memories. But a few years back, you and I had the opportunity to start working together, and we continue to work with CRS, providing a variety of different marketing services. But Fancher, I love your story. I love the firm's story. So if you would just share with our listeners a little bit about you, how you came to CRS and CRS's story as well, because it's a fascinating narrative of how it even got started.
Yeah, I love talking about how we got here. So I actually started here as an intern while I was in my senior year at Union. And at the time, it was a small, I think I was the 5th employee.
Oh, wow.
Hired in.
Number 5. Okay.
Yeah, number 5. And we stayed around there at that stage for, I'd say, probably first 10 years of my career here. And then just by, faith's design, we started talking to some other firms that were in similar position. And when I say similar positions, that were sole proprietors who had grown their firms to a handful of employees, but they were reaching their milestone where they wanted to retire and have someone succeed them. And so their plan was let's merge together and create a larger firm that can attract that talent. And so they did that. And I was, of course, part of the firm at that time. And so in 2001, I stepped in as shareholder, and I didn't become managing shareholder until our founder, who was Clark Cowart, decided to retire in 2016. And at that time, they elected me into the managing shareholder role. And that was, at that time, we had grown to about 30 employees among our 5 offices.
So you joined as an intern, like you said, employee number 5, hung out there for about 10 years. You said in 2001 is where you guys were having these conversations. So how many firms in total joined together to create CRS?
So 4 firms joined together to create the original CRS,
Okay.
and that was 2010. And since then, we've actually acquired a few other firms and have grown our footprint up to 6 total offices and 50 total employees.
So I want to point this out for a minute because I think this is really fascinating. You came in employee number 5, and now you guys are now at 50 total.
Correct.
And I love the journey of, I mean, how often do people land with a company, but they only stay there for a couple of years and move to the next and then the next? But you spent your career from internship now to managing shareholder, which I think is really cool. So talk a little bit about what you guys have done, even over the last few years, because here you have these multiple smaller practices that have merged together. And you mentioned something a minute ago that I think was interesting. You said part of the reason that you guys wanted to form a larger company was so that you could attract the talent you needed.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about that and what you saw as the benefit of getting bigger and scaling through these mergers.
Well, we knew the way our industry was going, specialization was needing to occur within our own personal realm of expertise, not just as a firm, but as each professional. It required such a depth of technical knowledge in some of the areas we were working in. We knew we couldn't be a generalist firm anymore. For example, what I mean by that, when I first started here, I did bookkeeping for small businesses. I did tax returns for individuals, for corporations. I worked on audits, which is a completely different realm in the field. I worked on reviewed financial statements. Basically anything and everything an accountant could do, I was doing. But it's hard to do anything really well when you're trying to do everything. In order to attract the talent and to continue the legacy of what all these our original founders and their individual firms had created, we knew we needed to join forces and start creating those little niches within our own firm. Even though our firm has a few niches overall within the organization itself, we have different lines of services that folks work in that help them specialize and deliver better service to those clients we're working with.
It's really kind of fascinating just to see that journey, these smaller offices combine and then find areas of specialization. Because to your point, it's the old adage, of course, master, or was it a jack of all trades,
Yes,
master of none?
that's right.
And so you saw and felt like the goal to sustained growth was to have distinct areas of specialization.
Yeah, and so that journey really, it's easy to talk about now, but it was really hard to live out because during those first few years of joining, there was really a lot of challenge of giving up old ways of doing things. I've always done it this way. The limiting belief that the clients expect me to be able to do it all, or I've always been in control. I don't want to have to give up control. So really for about the first 5 or 6 years, that was a large challenge. And it was the catalyst of 2020 and the COVID year that really forced our hand. And we had to decide, hey, we've got to really buckle down, get a clear vision of who we are and why we exist, and teach that and live that out with our team every day so that our clients understand it. And that was, yeah, like I said, 2020 was a real catalyst to just force those changes on us because we knew if we didn't, we were going to be obsolete and not survive it.
So there's a lot going on here. Now I'm thinking for our listeners, CEOs and business owners who are approaching growth from different perspectives. And there are several things, Fancher, that you've mentioned that I think are relevant to a couple of different scenarios. And so I want to take a moment and just kind of unpack a couple of these. So the first one is you mentioned it was this shift of, hey, we've always done it this way. Now, there are lots of businesses that aren't growing through acquisition or mergers who are still running into that kind of scenario. I think about just the marketing world right now just the business world in general right now is changing so quickly because of AI. And so what wisdom do you have that you would share with a business owner who's dealing with that type of scenario? Maybe they're trying to lead their team and they're trying to shift some things, whether it's related to marketing or just running a business in general, but they're running into this, hey, we've done it this way for years. What advice would you share with them?
I would say first and foremost, you've got to get back and dig in your own soul of why you're in this business that you're in, why you're doing what you're doing. If you don't know why you're here doing it, for me, the how and what we do will always be out of alignment with our values. And so for us, how we handle that is we looked internally. We had never had a written vision or mission statement or a set of core values, and we didn't take a top down approach, but we all had this sense that, well, we've always hired, we worked with people we know that shared a same, faith, a similar set of values of family first, of giving back to our communities. We knew those values existed. We said, all right, so something's there. And so we just spent some time as a group of leaders within the firm digging into that to come up with our why and said, that's exactly right. This is why we exist, who we are. Now, how do we translate that into the services we offer, how we deliver those services, how we communicate those services, which that's when we reached out to you and your team, because as good as we are at delivering them, being able to communicate that message is something, we as accountants weren't trained in. So don't be afraid to step out and ask for help from others.
And I remember when you reached out, I think you guys were going through the process of implementing EOS, or at least I think we're using that as a framework for building
Yes.
out your mission, vision, values, etc. I think sometimes CEOs and owners, we feel like we have to figure it out. And, a lot of times that can be a big waste of energy and time. Whereas if you ask for help, if you look for tools, these frameworks, coaches, guides, etc., it can really accelerate that. So you and your team get aligned, you get that mission, that vision. You see Simon Sinek talks about the why, how, and the what. You get alignment there. And what did you see as a result of that?
So I saw our folks really becoming more excited about showing up, even with our own owners here, kind of reigniting that passion of why we all, we first had our first day on the job here. And we saw our turnover reduce. I'd love to say it was down to zero, but we know that's not a reality in today's world. But it did reduce, just more engagement from our team. And really, it drove profitability because we had that common language and understanding of this is why we exist. Pricing conversations had always been a challenge with us and our client base, but getting clarity around everything allowed us to just go into those conversations with more confidence, understanding the value we are bringing.
I love that your point, your focus on getting that clarity, that when you get that alignment, because I think sometimes if somebody, there are going to be some people who just immediately push back because your response to, well, how do you address these inconsistencies and trying to get everybody on the same page? And you went deep. I mean, you go to the heart of here, why do we exist as an organization? And I think some people are looking for that quick win, but really you've got to go deep. But once you get that alignment, then you start to see the payoffs. You start to see the ROI. So it's not just that everybody's getting along better, but like you said, your turnover goes down. So that's cost savings right there when you keep the right people longer. And then ultimately, I mean, that's affecting the pricing conversations. So I think that's getting that clarity really is priceless because it's hard to have external clarity talking to your customers when you don't have it internally.
Yeah. And I'll share this. One of the big lessons I learned out of doing that I'm still learning today is you constantly have to tend that soil and keeping that clarity. Because one of the missteps I made is we spent about a year getting that done. All right, now we've got it done. And I dove right back into doing client work and focusing outwardly on the clients that I personally worked with and let that go by the wayside. And then I saw things start to kind of splinter again. And really over the past couple of years is reinforced that with me, that part of my job as a leader is to constantly, like I said, tend that soil of reminding people, communicating it, why we exist, what we're doing. And so then every decision we make, we hold up to that light.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a valuable reminder because it's easy to get lost in the day to day. And we can forget that some of that, it's a little bit squishier. It's the softer, it feels intangible sometimes, but it has very tangible results. And as I've heard multiple people say over time, vision leaks. Our team forgets.
Yeah.
And they do. They need those reminders. So I think that's a great piece of advice is for our CEOs and owners, it's your job to make sure that vision is being communicated, but not only the vision, the culture, the values, and that is maintained, stays top of mind. Because otherwise, if you don't, nobody else is going to. So, Fancher, one other thing I want to go back to for just a minute, because I think it's really important, is you mentioned that as you guys were going through this process, that you mentioned a limiting belief of, I guess, having to work through this idea of, as you focus in on specializations of, I can't do it all. I can't be everything to everybody. And that's a wall that some people never get past. So just walk through briefly, what was that journey like of narrowing your focus and recognizing, because what that ultimately means is there are people you're saying no to. No, I'm sorry, I can't serve you. I'm not the best fit for what you need. And yeah, so walk through that a little bit.
Oh, yes. So that is probably our single most limiting belief or challenge that we still have today. Just quite frankly, we're still not perfect at it. In our profession and being in rural West Tennessee, it's easy to fall into that mindset that, well, I'm one of only maybe 2 providers in town that can do this work. So of course I have to say yes. So I'm constantly having to keep that forefront, that thought forefront in our minds that yes, I can doesn't mean yes, I should. And so that having to really, it's just a mind and say, look, every yes you tell a client, you have to defend by 100 no's to other potential clients, because one of the struggles we had was tax season. When I started working here, 70-hour week tax seasons were the norm. Now 45 hours are the norm.
That's significant.
But yeah, because we've all understood that one of our core values is family time, church on Sundays, worshiping with a body of believers, that if we're going to say those are our values, every decision we make in our business also has to be able to support that value. And so between that and just attracting the next generation who don't have that value of, my work is who defines what I am, is just part of who we are now, but it's still a challenge because we all have that value. We want to help people. So when somebody's sitting across from the table, you so bad, want to say yes because you can. But before I go into that meeting, I have to constantly thinking, all right, should I? Before I say yes, what am I saying no to if I say yes here?
So what's some of the criteria that you use to help determine, because like you said, that's an important distinction between I can, but doesn't necessarily mean that I should. So what's some of the criteria, an example of criteria that you would use to determine whether or not this would be the right opportunity to say yes to? And you mentioned core values. So I think that's you looking at your values. What other criteria are you also using in that type of decision?
Good question. I say one of the values we look for, whether it's a client or a new hire, is are they teachable? Are they proactive themselves? We look for the easiest way for me to put a concrete example of a prospect client I'm sitting with. I sit down one just in a conversation. I like to get a sense, do they share some of the same values we share as a firm? Do I get a sense that they'll show up on time when requested? Will they be teachable? Will they take my advice when I give it to them? Or are they going to be the kind that, always runs in here last second saying, this deadline's tomorrow, I forgot to bring this to you?
Yeah, I think those are all really important considerations. And I would even add to that, this goes back to clarity. And of course, coming at this from a marketing and a CMO perspective, it's having that clarity also around who is your best customer. And I really like that you're bringing up some of the things that sometimes people overlook. Yes, you want to have your definition of, and of course for CRS, and you guys do a lot of work with farmers, you do a lot of work with nonprofits, you do a lot of work with service-based companies. And so it's having definition of what types of businesses, however you're determining that, the types of businesses where you have a certain level of expertise. And what you're bringing up is a deeper layer that I think gets overlooked. And that's some of those behavioral types of things that you won't necessarily be able to pick up on until you have a conversation. Is this person teachable? Are they going to receive our advice? Because I know one of the things that's really important for y'all is guiding your clients. It's giving them strategic guidance. It's not just, yes, you'll keep their books up to date and do their taxes, but I know it's important for y'all as well, is giving that guidance. But if they're not going to receive that, if they're not teachable, they're not going to be a good fit. And there's just going to be that tension. And so what have you found? What tends to be the result when you guys do have, when all those boxes are checked, they're the right industry, it aligns value wise. What ends up being the result of that, both for you and for the client?
Well, just much more enjoyable work, the easy answer, but we also create what we feel are true partnerships and not just a compliance checklist for the client that, oh, I got my taxes done. I got that off my list. And it creates more margin just, in profits and in time because we know we're delivering more value. We don't have to deliver a little value to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
We can deliver deeper value. And so that protects, like I said, it protects my margin of time for my family, for things I like to do outside the office. And that's still a challenge every day because every once in a while, a non-fit client still gets through the gate. Thankfully, I like to think we recognize those quicker and either rehabilitate them or transition them somewhere else.
Well, I think we've all had that experience of saying yes to a client. And even sometimes it's just a gut check. There's just something there. You just know, okay, something here, but we say yes anyway, whether it's because hey, this is going to have an immediate impact on cash flow, or whatever that is, whatever the motivation is. And in hindsight, it ends up sucking the energy out of us. And which goes back to having that alignment with core values. You want to protect that time for your team and quality of life, etc. Well, Fancher, this has been fantastic. Is there any final piece of advice that you would give to CEOs, business owners, just based on your experience and learnings and your continued journey towards growth?
Yes, I would say once you get that why you exist down, hire folks that fit that and train the technical side of your business. If you hire for that cultural fit, it makes it a whole lot easier to live out your mission and values.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Fancher, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, my
And Fancher,
pleasure.
why don't you give it just a quick, where can people find you? And if you want to give like a 30-second commercial, just share with a little bit more about what CRS does, who you guys work with.
Yeah, so you can find us at CRSCPA.com. That's the quickest and easiest way to find us. You can find us on LinkedIn under CRS CPA or myself at Fancher Sargent. And what we do is we make the complicated simple so that others are free to focus on what they do to fulfill their purpose.
Fantastic. And we'll put those links in the show notes. Again, Fancher, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good to see you.
There's so much to this conversation that I think most CEOs can relate to. CRS didn't grow from 5 to 50 plus employees by accident. They grew because they were willing to merge practices, to specialize, to confront their limiting beliefs, and most importantly, get crystal clear on who they are and why they exist.
And I love that their growth wasn't just about numbers, it reshaped their culture. When they clarified their values, the turnover dropped and engagement increased. Pricing conversations became easier, and people actually enjoyed showing up because they understood what they were working towards. That's the kind of alignment that most leaders would love to have.
And Fancher said something I think every leader needs to remember, and that is that clarity isn't a one-time event. Vision leaks, alignment drifts. And if you don't reinforce these things, they fade. And leadership really is ongoing stewardship. It's keeping your mission visible and top of mind, and it's making sure the decisions are lining up with who you say you are.
And the other big takeaway is I can doesn't always mean I should. That's a great lesson. Saying yes to the wrong client or the wrong opportunity or the wrong partnership can cost us way more than we may think at the time. And when you know your values and your focus and what your purpose and your mission are, then saying no becomes leadership, not guilt.
So if you're listening and you feel stuck or you're teams, your marketing and sales teams in particular, feel misaligned, or it's time to tighten your focus, then let this conversation encourage you. You don't have to figure it out alone. Frameworks, coaches, guides, they accelerate clarity.
If you need help getting clarity around your marketing, your message, or your next steps, that's exactly what we do.
Here at Wayfind Marketing, we help growth minded CEOs who are trying to grow but often feel stuck simplify their marketing. And we do that by starting with a strategy and clarity. And we help you figure out what's working, what's not, where to focus as you grow. And a great place to get started for free is our online marketing assessment. It gives you an honest look at your marketing, helps you see what's working, what's not, where you're aligned, where you're misaligned. And we also offer coaching for CEOs and their marketing teams who are looking for a trusted guide to help them scale more effectively, more efficiently. You can find the assessment and learn more about what we do and how we help businesses like yours at wayfindmarketing.com. And of course, to Fancher, thank you again for joining us, sharing your story. And to all of you listening, we appreciate you being a part of another episode of the Growth Minded Marketing Podcast.
If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with a friend or give us a quick review. That really goes a long way. We'll see you next time.